Welcome to the Pachehra Talks channel, and today we are going to discuss design a messaging solution. In previous video, we tried to differentiate between the message and the event, but today we are going to start with the design a messaging solution. And to understand that, we need to first check what are messaging pattern and how they help us. So messaging patterns help us connect services in a loosely coupled manner. We already know the benefits of loosely coupled manner. That's how the modern service is designed. So what this means is that services never talk to each other directly, no dependencies. Instead, a service generates and sends a message to a broker, generally a queue, and any other service that is interested in that message can pick it and process it. There is no direct communication between the sender and receiver services. This is decoupling not only makes services and the overall application more reliable, but also more robust and fault tolerant. Receivers can receive and read messages at their own speed. Messaging helps the creation of asynchronous patterns. So, overall base architecture be like messaging involves sending messages from one entity to another. These messages are created and forwarded by a sender, stored in a durable storage, and finally consumed by recipients. But what are the architectural concerns addressed by messaging patterns? Let's find it out. So, the very first is durability. Messages are stored in a durable storage, and applications can read them after they are received in case of a failover. Reliability. Messages help implement reliability as they are persisted on disk and never lost. Availability of messages. The messages are available for consumption by applications after the restoration of connectivity and before downtime. So we have two services here to choose for designing a messaging solution: Azure Queue Storage Service Bus. So let's check out Azure Queue Storage first. Azure Queue Storage is a service that uses Azure storage to store large numbers of messages. The messages can be securely accessed by HTTP from anywhere in the world using simple REST-based interface. Queues can contain millions of messages. Azure Queue Storage is limited only by the capacity of the storage account that owns it, up to 500 TB. Queue generally provide increased reliability, guaranteed message delivery, and transactional support. No guarantee for order though. Any kind of message like text, JSON, XML up to 64 KBs for 7 days retention is these are the some main features of Azure Queue Storage. Well, it's a simple messaging service, so it is possible for messages to be delivered out of order. So that might be okay if you're building some sort of application where ordering is not concerned, like video upload solution. It might be okay if even there is a duplicate messages. But what happens if you're building a solution that is talking about orders, processing the delivery of stock to consumers, processing orders? That's the situation where you definitely don't want to have a duplicate orders accidentally in the queue or by any means. And maybe it's also important if you're processing inventory in which order these messages are processed as well. You might need to be sure that inventory is coming in before it's being shipped out. For example, if you're building some sort of solution where you need those requirements. So long story short, if you are looking for the first come and first serve or first in or first out, you want delivery, consistent delivery with the maintained order, then Azure Queue is not the best solution because there is no order. To solve this problem, we have Azure Queue Bus or Azure Bus Queues. It provides much more advanced capabilities, connectivity over AMQP, which is an open source standard called Advanced Messaging Queue Protocol. It's an industry standard protocol that helps for the enterprise grade messaging. Well, with Azure Service Bus, we do not get large queues, but we do get support for the large messages. We get up to 100 megabytes in size for the message size, but for the entire queue, it's 80 gigs. And 100 MB is when we are using premium tier. But really, the key focus for service bus queues and why we are going to use it over storage queues is because that additional capability around messaging, guaranteed at most once delivery and guaranteed first in, first out. So if order does matter to you in your solution, you can't have duplicates. You need to ensure that messages are only delivered once at most. This is where we going to use service bus queues. What does it look like? Well, it's actually fairly similar to Azure storage queues. We don't have a storage account. We have something called namespace that does determine the pricing feature and so on. But as you can see, both queues are almost similar. There's a send and there's a receive and there is a queue. All right, so these are two messaging queue services. So far, we have discussed one main sort of model of using messaging. And that's where we have a component that's going to submit messages to a queue and the recipient that's going to handle those messages from the queue. But what happens if we have more than one recipient? This is where we use topics. It's built on service bus queues. Yes, it is Azure Service Bus Topics. Or it provides the same sort of functionality. We can publish messages to the queue, but we can actually have multiple different recipients that are able to receive all of those messages as well. So what that looks like, well, we start with our namespace. It's all still a service bus feature, but then what we have is something different. We have a thing called topic. Now the topic is going to be the endpoint that our sender is going to send those messages to, and then we are going to have our recipients connect to something called a subscription. Now, really, what we are kind of talking about here are duplicate queues. So we can still send our messages in exactly the same way. We still have our senders, we still have our receivers, but they can separately connect to their own individual version of the queue, kind of like a duplicate queue. There we go. As you can see, the messages are duplicating and receivers are getting those messages. So you can easily understand the need of this kind of solution. Very simple high-level example to understand is YouTube bell icon. A new video uploaded or released, people who have subscribed to it will get the notification. Now, where it's going to differ from what we spoke of the queues, whether it was storage queue or service bus queue, is that the message is going to be duplicated. It's going to be duplicated to those subscriptions that we have created. And in that way, we can have more than one recipient. So if you have a scenario where you want to decouple your components of a solution, but you have receivers that are concerned with the exact same messages as other receiver component, then this is where you can use service bus topic. Well, enough of all the services for messaging solution. Now quickly check when to use what scenarios. So use Azure Queue Storage if a simple queue to organize messages is the ask, and on the trail of all messages that pass through the queue. Queue exceed 80 gigs because it supports more than that. To track progress for processing a message inside of the queue. So if you try to generalize all these scenarios, you'll find Azure Storage Queue is a simple queue solution. There is no guarantee for the order, and it provides large size of the queue. Now, let's check use Azure Bus Queues if at most once delivery guaranteed, like those solutions that we talked about, where the order is important. We can at least once message processing peak log receive mode, at most once message processing receive and delete receive mode, group messages into transactions to receive messages without polling the queue, to handle messages larger than 64 KB but less than 256 KB. Queue size will not grow larger than 80 gigs, to publish and consume batches of messages. So these are some examples where we can opt for Azure Service Bus Queue, but as we say, for topics, for Azure Bus Queue topics, it's the same. The duplication is the only scenario that we can thought of right now. Multiple receivers to handle each messages, or multiple destination for a single message, but need queue-like behavior. Well, so these are some of the scenarios that we can opt for different services. And I thank you for watching and take care.